Hi folks, Canadian Prepper here. I hope you guys are keeping cool. We are going to be seeing a heat dome descend upon us here in the next week, and it is going to be sweltering. So make sure you have an ample stockpile of water and a means to keep yourself cool. My friends, if you live in the cities, especially in the thick of one of these heat waves, you need to have a plan in order to keep yourself cool and an escape plan, because once the trucks stop rolling, remember, the trucks carry in energy, they carry in supplies, and most importantly, they carry in food. Once the food trucks stop rolling, it's going to be pandemonium in all directions. 360 panic will ensue, and most of these people who live in the cities, and understandably so, have no time to concern themselves with matters of preparedness and self-reliance, because there simply isn't the means to do so. However, it's no excuse for you, the one listening to this video, to not have an escape plan, so you can avoid that gridlock which is going to take place in all directions when everybody is trying to escape at once. Now, we need to talk about some developments within the last 72 hours. Pardon my absence. We've been trying to get a lot of other things done that are more important than just talking, okay? Talk is cheap. It's good to keep informed, but at some point, you need to be focusing on the pragmatic aspects of preparedness, and that's what we've been doing. Now, we recently discussed a grain deal which was to take place between Russia and Ukraine to potentially push back the dreaded global famine which is about to ensue as a result of this war. And there seemed to be some glimmers of hope at the time that perhaps these two would come together and work together, and there still is. However, the day after that, Russia apparently struck the port of Odessa with a missile strike. Now, Russia initially denied this, to Turkey, that is, but then later Russia claimed that they indeed did attack and target some military installations at the port of Odessa. So I personally think that this whole grain deal is doomed to failure, simply because it's in a war zone and it's in a contested area, and Odessa itself is a port city which is in the crosshairs of Russian annexation. So I don't understand how we can believe or have faith and confidence that this deal is actually going to yield something positive. I think what it is, it's an opportunity for both sides to say, hey, look, we tried, and for both sides to potentially game it and buy themselves time in order to, rally their forces and get prepared for the next major wave, the next offensive. So I'm not putting a whole lot of stock in this grain deal, as I'm not putting much stock in any sort of peace talks. There's so much money being pumped into this war. It's starting to seem like a massive racket on both sides. You have arms being sent all over the world from their illegal arms sales. It just appears as though everybody involved has their hand in the pie, and they're playing with fire because, of course, they're playing with nuclear fire, and that is something which is relevant to us all, and that's the only reason why I'm focused on it whatsoever. I mean, yes, there are global economic ramifications that are going to impact us with respect to oil prices and food prices, but the main reason why we keep our eyes laser focused on this issue is the potential for nuclear escalation. Now, speaking of which, there has been some suspicion that militants have planned to blow up radioactive waste storages in the DPR's Konstantinovka, and that is a place within the DPR, within the Donbass, which is a contested region again, that they have mined these places, and that upon leaving, they may decide to detonate these places. So the potential for dirty bombs throughout Ukraine is very high. Right now, Russia holds they hold one, the main nuclear power plant that I believe has 6 reactors, but there are 15 nuclear reactors spread across 5 nuclear power plants within Ukraine. Ukraine still controls a lot of those, the vast majority of those, while Russia controls the largest single nuclear power station, of which they are housing armaments at to act as a shield, just like I said. Now, there is an intensification of exchanges happening at these various power plants, which of course is concerning because you could potentially have a nuclear incident on your hand, one in which would likely force, and this could potentially, I mean, now that I just think about it, you know, as bad as it would be, it might force some kind of truce if an incident like that happened, because if they didn't work together to contain it, then, you know, all of Ukraine would suffer as a result, and most of Europe for that matter. So the situation is only looking like it's going to intensify. Like I say, I get these glimmers of hope when we talk about peace talks, when we talk about, you know, one side's starting to wane in this war of attrition, which is what it is, but it doesn't appear so. And it appears as though China is continuing to stockpile grain, okay, when millions of people are facing starvation around the world. As you know, China's been stockpiling grain for many years and run up, and now they have a record surplus of this grain, and they continue to stockpile the grain. Now, apparently, 40% of the grain that has been shipped from Ukraine in April has actually gone to China. Okay, this is particularly awkward considering there are countries like Egypt, which are wholly dependent on Ukraine. So the question is, why is China continuing to stockpile grain? Well, I think we know why, because when the whole Taiwan thing kicks off, China, who is a net importer of many of these staple goods that their population requires in order to sustain them, is likely not going to be able to do so. So they're amassing stockpiles right now for when they have to make their move in Taiwan. Now, the Biden administration has apparently, it sounds like they are going to cancel Pelosi's trip to Taiwan, although you never know nowadays. They'll probably go through with it just, you know, to see how far they can push the line. It seems like there's a lot of line pushing going on both sides. And of course, we're playing with nuclear fire here, unfortunately. And there still is that very stern warning from China to not sell the Taiwanese weapons, $120 million worth of weapons, which of course would end up being used against China in a war if it broke out. So we have intensification on all fronts in spite of some softening of relations, you know, that we're seeing with respect to the grain deal. Unfortunately, these things are just untenable at this point in time. There is just no situation in which something like that can be sustained while you're fighting an active hot war over the region that you're talking about. They're also talking about the unification of Transnistria, which is on course to be annexed by Russia as well. And that, of course, is on the opposite side of Odessa. So without getting too much into the geography, you just need to know that there are many independent states that are very staunchly aligned with Russia. And they're all talking about being annexed by Russia and becoming part of Russia, all the way from, West Ukraine, southwest Ukraine to the east. And of course, once that happens, that's going to be a big red line, I think, for Ukraine and for the United States. Now, we also have this situation developing with the U.S. potentially designating Russia as a state sponsor of terrorism. So that's another red line, according to Russia. If they do that, then that would, I guess, allow the United States to intervene more. And that would, of course, increase the tensions. We also have the other red line is the United States sending actual fighter jets, American fighter jets, and training Ukrainians on these fighter jets. Okay, that's going to be a big red line, and they're already talking about doing that again. The plan was shelved a while ago, but I suspect that they are training either, Ukrainians or training some mercs to fly these things there. I think that that's kind of been the plan all along, but we'll see. You just never know nowadays. What else do we got going on in the news today that is worth noting? Interestingly, the U.S. government has installed it in its efforts to remove Huawei telecom equipment that the FBI claims could have spied on and disrupted communications at U.S. military bases, including housing nuclear missiles. Okay, this is very, very significant. So all the more intensification on the eastern front of things. And in addition to that, apparently China has disabled Teslas in a lot of places because they are worried about Teslas recording information and potentially sending that back to U.S. intelligence. So, I've always thought it was kind of weird that Tesla was building a plant there in light of all that was going on. But it seems like that too will succumb to the firewall and the Great Wall, if you will, in terms of censorship and restrictions. And it makes perfect sense. But I tell you, we live in a glass house in Western society. And that's one of the downsides. We may be the hub for innovation and creativity. We may not have the ability to mobilize manpower in mass, but one thing our society has always accelerated in is innovation, because we have this laissez-faire free market, which facilitates and accommodates creative thought, and it attracts artisans. Unfortunately, they don't have that in Asia, but what they do have is, full spectrum dominance over information, and they can peer into the West, which is a glass house, right? That's the downside of having this free market that we do, is that it has to be free in order for it to work. And the downside of that is that any authoritarian society can leverage that to their advantage, because they can easily peer in and see everything that is going on, whereas over there's an iron curtain. We can't see what's going on inside. We also have this climate situation intensifying. We have a pretty nasty heat dome coming over us in the next week, which is likely going to bring record temperatures to many parts of Canada. And we're also seeing that, of course, in the States. Apparently in Europe, they've already burned 3 times the amount of forest as usual by this time. Okay, and that's the same thing is true in Alaska as well. Across the state, 264 individual fires burning and on its track to break its 2004 record of 6.5 million acres burned. We have a big fire that just flared up in California, which looks like they're going to get their fire season started a little bit late, but that one is looking like it's going to be pretty bad. We have the situation developing for U.S. farmers in that this intense heat and dry conditions and droughts are making it very difficult to grow food. Okay, Oklahoma cattle rancher, for example, Charlie Swanson, says temperatures have exceeded 100 degrees every day this month, including a 114-degree scorcher on Tuesday. When combined with virtually no rain, the heat is roasting his pastures, killing the grass and forage he grows for his cattle to graze on. The high temperatures come as Oklahoma ranchers were already paying for more feed, fertilizer, fuel, and other costs. Swanson's feed costs have climbed by roughly $100 per ton versus last year, and fertilizer is more expensive. So this is why you have that triad of conflict, contagion, and climate all intersecting to create the perfect crap storm, which is going to make life unbearable for many moving forward. Now, the WHO has declared this whole primate pox thing a global emergency. I don't know enough about it to really comment on it. I haven't really looked at the statistics, the fatality rates, the infection rates, or anything like that. All I know is that they're apparently making it a big deal now, whereas before it wasn't such a big deal. So it's starting to look a lot like how the other pandemic, began, the genesis of that one, and how it wasn't a big deal at the start, and then suddenly it was a big deal. And even the origins are rather suspicious. Apparently, Dr. John Campbell said that there was work being done on this particular virus at the infamous laboratory that we're all aware of. Now, if I was to be the devil's advocate, I would probably suspect that a lot of these viruses were being worked on in those laboratories, because that's what you would do. So, to draw the connection, I don't know if it's necessarily that meaningful, but like I say, I'd have to do more. I'd have to look into it more. Honestly, not losing sleep over that. But I think contagion as a whole is definitely going to be a problem moving forward, whether it's the pandemic that's going on right now, or a new one, or primate pox, or whatever the heck. Okay. So we also have, and I'm going to make a video about this very specific thing, and I'm going to be releasing it probably in the next few days. Russia and China announcing a new global reserve currency. Okay. The BRICS nations are what they're going to try to do, that's Brazil, Russia, China, India, and a few others, possibly Saudi Arabia, possibly even Turkey. They're going to try to make a basket of currencies, which is going to be the new global reserve currency that is said to try to compete with the US dollar, which is strong right now, but only because all the other currencies are weak. And if you look at all of the other currencies, when compared to gold, the price of gold is very stable. The only reason why the price of gold, as measured in US dollars, has gone down is because the US dollar is much stronger, and a lot of people have had to sell gold to make up for margins for the margin calls that those who lost out in the stock market, they get the margin call, they have to pay the debt, so they sell some gold. But all indicators are suggesting that the price of gold is going to be going up. And that's not necessarily a good thing, because remember, the price of gold is stable throughout time. You don't expect to make money on gold. 2,000 years ago, 1 ounce of gold would have bought you a really, really fancy suit, right? Today, 1 ounce of gold will buy you a really, really fancy suit. Its sole purpose is as a store of value. It's not some get-rich-quick pyramid crypto scheme, okay? They also want to introduce some kind of new SWIFT system, which is going to offer a reliable alternative mechanism for international payments, because, as you know, Russia was cut off of SWIFT. And whenever you do something like that, people lose confidence in the system. And a lot of countries are looking for alternatives right now. And if you have this, this is something which probably is a ways off still, but the writing is on the wall for the US dollar. Not only are we, eroding culturally, but we're also eroding as an economic power. And up next will be a military power, when we invariably are worn down by this attritional war with China, Russia, and Iran. What else can we talk about today? We talked about the food situation. All the more reason to make sure you have if you have a city, or if you live in the city and you have a yard, try to get yourself a large supply of water. You can get those big water tanks, those big square water tanks. Usually you can get them discounted or even free in some places. Just fill one of them up with water while you have the chance. They're already talking about some pretty serious water restrictions in places that are reliant on the Colorado River, because that's so low. Lake Mead is apocalyptically low right now. We've been talking about this for years, my friends. You need to make sure, if you live in the desert, okay, don't, you may live in the country in the desert and you may think that you have a viable means of collecting water. But, you know, I personally think that strategic relocation right now, it's not just about population density, it's about where the resource is, it's about how deep your well is going to be. And personally, I would not be living in the desert right now. You know, maybe there's enough natural carrying capacity of the land to support a smaller amount of people, and once all the people are chased out of Las Vegas because the taps just turn off and the power shuts off, maybe there'll still be enough natural water in the water table that exists to support a small amount of people, which will be the rural people. But you know, I'm not very confident on that as we're seeing these climate trends continue. What else do we got here? We talked about the Yosemite fire, talked about China stockpiling grain. I think we've talked about most of the things that we need to talk about today. And yes, the war is definitely intensifying. Don't be fooled. It's only going to get worse. And Russia has deployed one of their new submarines, Belgorod, they're calling it, and it has the potential to carry 8 Poseidon nuclear warheads, each of which are 100 megatons. Just an unimaginable nuclear weapon, which is twice the size of anything ever detonated. Okay, so we're talking about nuclear tsunamis the world over, and that's what they're going to leverage to continue to push. And sooner or later, guys, sooner or later, we're going to have a radiological incident, and when it happens, there's going to be worldwide panic. Either it's going to be a detonation of a nuclear weapon, or it's going to be a dirty bomb, or it's going to be one of these nuclear power plants that both sides are storing weapons in that gets hit, that gets caught up in the crosshairs of the war, and that is going to create panic. Of course, we still have the energy shortage, which is ongoing. So to my European friends, make sure you have a contingency plan to stay warm. You know, stockpile things like blankets, make a hot room. If you can, get yourself a wood stove. That's easier said than done, because, you know, there's all sorts of regulations on that. You have to, you know, at least here anyways, there's building codes. You can't just, you know, put a hot stove anywhere. Man, I'm watching these people try to carry their stuff down the street, and it's not going well for them. When the trucks stop rolling, this place is going to be chaos. Anyways, guys, you guys take care, and go and check out some of the recent videos that we've made. One was a really fun video that we made with Dr. Bones and Nurse Amy, showing you what to do if you get a fracture or a bone break after the shizzy hits the fizzy. And the other one was just me and my daughter doing a freeze-dry video. People always say, oh, it's great to see you doing prepping videos again. The truth is, we never stop doing prepping videos. We release 1 or 2 videos like that a week. It's just that we're releasing so much more informational, talky content that stuff tends to get overlooked and buried. So, like I said, guys, we're running on all engines here with respect to preparedness. Okay, that's as we approach the 0 hour, we need to intensify in our preparedness. Okay, if you're just watching these videos and you're just listening to, you know, like the scare topics, and you're just wanting to view this as a form of entertainment, I guess that's fine. But I sincerely hope that people are taking action and doing whatever you can right now to prepare for when the whole thing comes crashing down. All right, my friends, you guys take care. Stay cool. Thanks for watching. Canadian Prepper out.